Welcome back to my channel, Navigating Midlife Live. I'm Connie Pertula. I'm also known as the Menopause Navigator. So, menopause and constipation, and why this can suddenly start to be an issue for women as they're navigating the stages of menopause. And it can start to show up in perimenopause, most definitely. But from what I see with a lot of my clients, it tends to get worse as we move through the various stages. So once we go into postmenopause, it does become a greater issue. And why is that? Now, I recently did a video on gut health and why I always start there. So I will link that at the end of this video that you can go watch that because there's many other things that can happen with gut health during menopause. But I thought it was really important to talk about constipation because this is something that for some women, they're almost too embarrassed to talk to their doctors about it. And I get it. And sometimes we don't even mention it to friends. I guess because I'm a nutritionist, people talk to me about these things. I mean, it's a normal body function. But for some women, they kind of suffer in silence and try to figure it out on their own. And that's where things can become even more complicated. So, shared previously that the fluctuations in estrogen can start to affect how well our digestive system is moving and how well it's moving the food through our digestive system. The same with progesterone as it starts to drop. Of course, that's our relax hormone. And, when our stomach doesn't feel relaxed, well, food's not going to move through. I've also previously mentioned that cortisol, for some women, high cortisol levels can cause constipation, really slowing down the digestive system. I'm sorry, I meant low cortisol levels can cause constipation. High cortisol levels can cause diarrhea. So it can be, if we think of anything in a really stressful situation, we look at animals. What do they do in a really stressful situation? Sometimes they'll urinate or sometimes they'll defecate. And humans are no different. That's also part of our fight or flight um, reaction to things is, that cortisol can actually, cause us to suddenly urinate or suddenly have the urge to defecate. So, cortisol is a big part of it, but there's more. I don't want to, just assume that hormones are the only thing because the other part is that, I work with women who are on hormone therapy and they're still having issues. So, I'm not against hormone therapy or saying that it's not helping. Hormone therapy can definitely help certain symptoms that a woman is feeling, but it's not the be all and end all. It's not necessarily going to fix everything that you're experiencing. This is where we need to take a deeper look. What is going on? So if we take away the stress, which we know, or if you don't know, can really reduce stomach acid. So once we don't have enough stomach acid, then of course the food's not being broken down properly. That can cause issues further down the line as that food moves through our digestive system. So, yes, so that is part of it. Stress is part of it. But there can be deeper issues. I can't just say to somebody, well, you know, be less stressed and see if your digestion improves. No, it's not that simple. I need to look deeper. So this is where I start to look at other things. Okay, how active is this person? Are they moving on a regular basis? And when I say moving, I don't mean having a bowel movement. I mean, are they moving their body? Because we know that if you're sedentary, that can cause issues with your bowels. So that can increase the incidences of constipation. So that's where, going for a walk. And again, I realize that, there are people who can't walk great distances. So, well, get to some other tips for them. But for people who can be active, that 10, 20, 30-minute walk is something that can really help to support your digestive system and help with moving your bowels, to making sure that you're having a daily bowel movement. Now, there's also some, I guess, opinions as to whether we have to have a daily bowel movement. I don't know. When I work with my clients and when they tell me how they're feeling when they're not having a daily bowel movement, even if they're having one every other day, they don't feel good. They feel sluggish. They feel, in some people actually call it toxic. They feel like they're holding all these toxins. So that's where I do encourage women to try and have a daily bowel movement. Okay, so we covered, moving the body. The other part is having consistent meals. I've shared previously, our body loves routine. So in that routine, it loves having the meals at the same time. There's also a process there with our digestive system. It can take anywhere from 2 to 5 hours, some say longer, for a meal to actually move out of our stomach, the first part of our well, besides the mouth. Let's call it the second part of our digestive system, to move from our stomach and start moving into the small intestine. So depending on what we've eaten, it can take anywhere from 2 to 5 hours for that to be broken down properly and start to move through the rest of our digestive system. It's at that sort of 5 hour mark, at the longest, that you want to make sure you're having your next meal. Because one, that's telling our body that we're getting consistent food. And two, it's helping to regulate your blood sugar better. It's, giving you consistent nutrients. When people, I hear women say, well, I had breakfast and then I was going out for a special dinner. So I decided to skip lunch because I wanted to be able to kind of eat whatever I wanted at dinner. Well, now you've told your body that there's no food available. So it starts to make changes. Okay, I'm not going to produce certain hormones. I'm not going to ask for food because for some reason she's telling me there's no food. So I always encourage my clients to have their meals at the longest 5 hours apart, ideally 3 to 4 hours after the last meal. That again, that adds to the routine that our body loves. And as I say, helps everything else overall, hormones, our digestion, how everything's being produced, it helps all of that. So that's another part, making sure that you're eating consistently. Now, I know I've talked about intermittent fasting before, and I do have a video that I did on intermittent fasting, but this is where as well too, sometimes when we go too long with intermittent fasting, so I'll give an example. People who have had their gallbladder removed, which is very common in women, especially women in menopause, because there is a hormone connection to our gallbladder and the bile that is produced. So when women don't have a gallbladder, and I've had so many of my clients tell me this that have had their gallbladder removed, that if I wait too long to eat and then I eat, all of a sudden I have diarrhea. And that's because all of a sudden there's a big flush of bile that comes out of your system. So if you've had your gallbladder removed, the best thing that you can do for your body is making sure that you're having consistent meals. This was something, I had my gallbladder removed many years ago, and this is something I had to kind of figure out on my own because nobody could explain it to me. Nobody warned me about it. But that's exactly what I found, that as long as I had consistent meals, then, my liver got used to, I'm assuming it got used to releasing bile, on a regular basis based on the food that was coming through. I can't explain it any other way than that. That once I was in a routine, then all of that started to calm down. Now, some people will say that the liver just gushes out bile. It has no control, but I question that because my clients that I've gotten on a regular eating schedule and eating shortly after they wake up within that 30 minutes to an hour, then all of those digestive issues started to go away. So that's something that we can keep in mind. So eating those consistent meals really helps. Not eating enough. And so again, people who are following sometimes a fast, maybe they're doing a juice fast or a soup fast. I've seen those, where people are just doing bone broth. Some people even go really extreme and do a water fast. I don't recommend that at all unless you have proper guidance, because you can really harm your body in those situations. But people who are doing fasts, and if they don't come out of the fast properly, I mean, you've just basically given your body no type of fiber for a long period of time when you're doing a fast. And then all of a sudden, you're going to reincorporate food that can put a lot of stress on the digestive system. So it's one of the reasons why I'm not a big fan of fasting, but it's also not good for women who are in the stages of menopause. And there's a lot of information out there about it. And as I say, I did a video about it before. So if we're not eating enough food, even if we're following, a process of eating, say, only 2 meals a day because we're fasting the rest of the time, well, again, to get in the amount of nutrients that you have to get in that short period of time, you're putting a lot of stress on your digestive system because you're giving it all of this nutrients all at once. It now has to adjust. So keeping it to 3 meals a day. If you need to have a snack, depending on how long your day is, right? Sometimes you need to have a snack somewhere in there. So be consistent with your meals and make sure that you're eating enough. I have I don't know, just sort of a principle that I talk to about my clients that, the last meal that was in there, the next meal is going to push it out. And if we look at animals, right? Animals generally have a bowel movement after they eat. And so, their systems are working properly, unless I guess they're completely stressed or sick. But, that's what's natural. Medications can cause issues. And so when you look at things like antidepressants, antihistamines can cause issues with constipation, opioids, painkillers, even the over-the-counter painkillers can cause constipation. So that's something to be aware of. My clients that sometimes end up in pain, because of previous injuries or, issues that have been like chronic pain issues. And when it gets to the point where they can't stand the pain anymore and they do need to take a painkiller, a lot of times that will throw their system off and they'll end up with constipation. So this is where it is important also to go back to your doctor and say, these are the issues I'm having. Now, my one concern would be, if they want to put you on some sort of a laxative or bowel relaxer, because again, that can be a really slippery slope. It's all about finding ways to maintain your digestion so that you don't have to do those things, because those are band-aids. And when those band-aids are used for too long, they cause further issues. So absolutely, be cautious on those things. Blood pressure medication can also cause a change in your digestive system and cause constipation as well too. So these are all things to just be mindful if this is something that is being introduced to you, something new that you need to start taking for health reasons, and you start to experience this. This is where you know taking note of that, and then, seeing how you can change your eating habits to support your digestion. The other part of it is people who are self-treating. So I've worked with clients that tried to solve this on their own and ended up in a worse situation. And so, it's very popular. I mean, I see all the YouTube videos and the posts on social media and stuff like that. Oh, just take magnesium citrate, or, you know, take some type of a magnesium at really high levels to move your bowels. Well, if you don't know what you're doing and if you don't know how to do it, again, you can get into a very serious situation where all of a sudden your bowels can become so lax that now you're in a diarrhea situation. And this isn't, again, something that, doing it occasionally, just to fix the situation, that's not the answer. Again, that's a band aid. Iron supplements are commonly known to cause constipation in people. So there are some iron supplements that I work with that are more gentle on clients' digestive systems and don't cause that constipation. But that's where we need to be mindful of, if this is being introduced, how do we support it? And so that's where, yeah, I'll always go back to chewing your food properly, making sure that it's really broken down. Um, uh, uh, you know, Having things like fruit, things that are higher fiber, but again, chewing them really well. Sometimes people, and I know that this is on the diarrhea side, but people will talk about, the bread, the rice, the bananas, and like chicken soup or something like that to help with people when they've got digestive issues. Well, a lot of those things are really high in sugars, like especially banana, that can cause further issues. So again, when people are looking at these things and self-treating, they can sometimes be causing further issues rather than solving what's going on. Having things like prunes aren't a bad idea. They're full of polyphenols, and because they're that dark color, they've got resveratrol in them, so they're good for our system. So if that's something that helps to keep you regular, I'd much rather somebody eat that than taking, a high dose of magnesium to move their bowels. That's, a much smarter way of doing things. But making sure that your meals are set up properly as well too, having your protein, having your high fiber carbs or slow carbs, whatever you want to call them. So the things like cabbage, broccoli, bok choy, Brussels sprouts, kale, all of those things are very high in fiber. I get a lot of clients that will say to me, yeah, but those cause gas. Well, they cause gas because you don't eat them on a regular basis. So introduce them slowly. And in the meantime, have things like yams or sweet potatoes or carrots or squash. Those things are very high fiber as well too, and they will support your system. And then eventually start to change that ratio where you're eating at least, one and a half. I love to see at least 2 cups of very high fibrous vegetables on a client's plate. And then having, as I mentioned, the starchy vegetables. So things like quinoa, brown rice. Some people say white rice is better. It's easier on the digestive system. Absolutely, that is true. Brown rice can also go bad quicker because it still has the bran on it. And it's the bran that can actually go bad because it's got all the oils in it. So that's where white rice stays longer. But sweet potatoes or white potatoes, especially if the white potatoes don't bother you. For some people, they can be very inflammatory and cause joint issues. I'm one of those people. I love white potatoes, but I can't eat them. But I can eat sweet potatoes with no problem because they're a different food family. Um, uh, so, um, Water is another one. Uh, you want to make sure that you're drinking adequate amounts of water. You don't want to get to the end of the day and go, oh, I didn't drink much water today, and drink a whole bunch of water, because, now you're going to be up in the night having to go to the bathroom. But, drinking water throughout the day. And if this is something new to you, then that's where, having a container sitting on the counter. I tell my clients, measure it out at the beginning of the day and put it somewhere where you're going to see it. And then, a glass, refill your glass and make sure that you're getting in the amount that you need. That also makes you get up and move as well too, because if you're drinking water throughout the day, you're going to have to get up and go to the bathroom. So that helps to move your body. Because I know I can be guilty of sitting in front of my computer for hours and not moving when I'm really into a project. One of the things that people don't realize is having too much fat can actually cause constipation. So I know keto diets are really popular with some people, but you don't even need to be on a keto diet to maybe be eating too much fat that might be causing constipation. Nuts and seeds are something that's really popular for people to eat as a snack, and they're good. This is especially true with people who don't have a gallbladder, that if your body isn't breaking down the fat content of food as efficiently because of how the bile is released, and it's not as concentrated as what it would be if you had a gallbladder. But having too many nuts and seeds, or even things like avocado, it could even be high fat dairy products. So this is something where, be mindful. If you notice that you're having constipation, that's where food journaling is so valuable, because the food journal can kind of show. I know for me, when I'm working with clients, it shows me patterns. It shows me patterns of what they're eating, and then how their body is responding, 2, 3 days later. And this is where I can start to identify issues. So write it down on a piece of paper. It can be really simple, or, take a picture on your smartphone, and start to look back. What did I eat? What was the content of that meal? And that's where, if you're eating too much fat, yes, that can most definitely be a cause of constipation. Drinking water with meals. So I know that I talked about making sure that you're getting enough water, but when we're drinking water, or doesn't even have to be water. It could be a soft drink. It could be, a libation, an alcoholic drink. It could be, coffee or tea, those types of things. People have all different habits. When we're drinking a liquid, that is further reducing the stomach acid in our stomach. So it's breaking down right from the saliva all the way down. It's breaking down all of that processing that's happening before that food actually hits your stomach. So you're diluting it. And if you're drinking too much water, and not for everybody, but again, I'm trying to provide general information. There are people out there that they have guts of steel and nothing affects them. But there's a lot more people who are dealing with digestive issues, and they're uncertain to why. So I always recommend have a glass of water or something, 20 minutes before you eat. If you need to have a little bit of water because you suffer from dry mouth, which can be common during the stages of menopause, have little sips of water with your food. Don't take big gulps of water. And then try to wait 30 minutes after your meal, preferably an hour, to let your stomach start to work on that food. Because the moment food hits your stomach, it's automatically increasing the stomach acid and everything that it needs to do to break that food down before it can move on to the next, basically, phase into the small intestine. So yeah, watch your water consumption when you're eating, and try to have your water consumption in between meals. Same thing if you're taking a medication or supplements, have small sips. Just take what you need to actually swallow, and then and then leave the rest. Something else that's not always thought about, and everybody is a little different as to how their system reacts to this. So, for me, for various reasons, I have a very sensitive digestive system. And this is where something like conventional foods that aren't organic, can actually really cause issues with my digestive system. Probably 95% of what I eat is either organic, or if it comes to meat, it's grass fed. I want to make sure that I'm as getting as clean as possible food as I can. And again, it's my reality. I have a sensitive digestive system. I have to support it the best I can. But for some people, eating conventional foods and the pesticides on those foods can cause a lot of issues. It can disrupt how the digestive system's working, how the digestive enzymes are working. So I would say that, if this is something that you're having an issue with, try switching over to organic food for a bit. Or at a minimum, if you're familiar with the Dirty Dozen, take a look, see what the Dirty Dozen are. Try to purchase those as organic. Celery is highly sprayed with pesticides, and a lot of people, do the celery juice and stuff like that. Could be causing more issues within your system. I mean, not only can it affect our digestive system, but it can affect our overall hormonal system, just because of the toxins from those pesticides. So try making the switch over to organic foods, or as I say, at a minimum, the Dirty Dozen, buy those as organic and see if that helps. A lot of times it's recommended, well, just for example, apples are always on the Dirty Dozen list. Well, just peel the apple. You're losing so much nutrients from the peel that, yes, the rest of the apple is good, but there's so much nutrients in the peel. So as much as possible, you want to be able to eat the peel. Something that you're peeling, like, an avocado, you can buy that as conventional, because that's being peeled off. You're just eating the inside. The same thing with squash. You're eating the inside. But when it comes to berries, sometimes those are very highly sprayed, and those are absolutely one of the foods that you want to purchase organic. White potatoes. There's herbicides, pesticides, fungicides, so that the potatoes, last. They're sprayed with a lot of things, and that's where, conventional potatoes can actually cause a real issue with people. For some reason, yams and sweet potatoes are different. They're not as bad. I guess they don't have as many things affecting them as what regular potatoes do. I think that was everything that I wanted to cover. Again, I always make notes so that I don't forget anything, because sometimes you know, I'll end the video and I'll go, darn, I wanted to mention that. So I'm just checking over my notes. Looks like I've got everything that I wanted to cover. So when it comes to constipation issues, I don't recommend trying to work on it on your own. I do think that you should get help, and get help with somebody who is familiar with it. Unfortunately, a lot of medical doctors are going to give you some kind of a stool relaxant or a stool softener. That's a Band-Aid. That's not helping. Okay, I just thought of something else that I wanted to mention with respect to the stomach acid and how your liver is producing bile. These things start to change as we age. We don't, in a lot of cases, most people don't produce enough stomach acid. Even people who think that they have acid reflux don't always necessarily produce enough stomach acid. So this is where using things like digestive bitters. Now, again, if you're going to start with something like that, with a digestive bitter, and you're on medication, you want to check with your doctor whether that is safe, or whether there are, I'm sorry, not your doctor, your pharmacist. You want to check with your pharmacist as to whether there's interactions with your medication. Because sometimes those things can move your medication through your body faster, and now you're not getting the support that that medication is supposed to provide. This is why self-treating with supplementation can be dangerous as well too, because if you're not checking with your pharmacist and there's interactions, your medication might not be working as well as it could be. So digestive bitters can help, but you can have bitter foods. Bitter foods are things like dandelion greens, arugula. That helps to turn up and turn up the saliva in our mouth, turn up the stomach acid in our stomach, and it can also start to turn up the bile. So you can look for bitter foods to help with that. Some people don't like the taste of bitter melon. I do. Bitter melon's another good one. That's more common in Asian food, Chinese food. But when it comes to the liver, there are things that you can do to support the liver. Again, those are things that I wouldn't recommend doing on your own unless you know why you're taking it and what is actually going on with your liver. And this is where, when people are self-treating, they're doing, different fasts, or, they're taking certain supplements to do a liver cleanse, you can actually be causing more issues than what you're solving. And this can now then start to add to issues around constipation. So so anyway, I'm really glad that I thought of that. And that's a point I didn't write down, so I'm glad it came to mind. So is constipation a given in the stages of menopause? Potentially, it can happen. Are there ways that you can work around it so that your digestive system works properly and you don't have to do, things like taking large amounts of magnesium to get your body to actually have a bowel movement? Yes, there are things that you can do, but it does mean paying attention. Our body wants our support, and our body will always support us. And so the best thing that we can do is give it support back. And there's lots of ways that we can do it without having to change our routines too much. If you found this video helpful, I'd really like you to like, subscribe, comment. That helps. Well, one, it helps YouTube and the algorithms see that people are watching my videos. But then in that case, YouTube will also put it in front of more women. And I believe that there's a lot of confusing information out there with respect to navigating the stages of menopause. And I feel that my advice is straightforward. I research everything. I have the education from a nutritional standpoint. And so I'd really like women to be able to have access to my information. So liking, subscribing, and there's a new thing on there, and I don't know when it shows up, but there's also now you can hype a video. And if somebody hypes your video, then it ends up being, more prominent on YouTube. If you're curious of what it would look like to have one-on-one support, I offer a 30-minute phone call conversation. We can talk about that, what issues you're going through and what kind of support would work best for you. So you can go to my website, and right on my homepage, you can schedule a 30-minute complimentary consultation. So thank you very much for joining me. I always enjoy doing these videos. I do enjoy sharing my knowledge. They are live, they're not perfect. I make mistakes. Sometimes I forget things. Hey, that's just being human. And that's also being a woman in menopause that sometimes has brain fog as well, too, like anybody else that can suffer from it. So thank you very much for joining me. Have a great week, and I'll see you again next week.